Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, beginning interview. Kind of let's take you back to the early days of the production of Wednesday. Like, can you walk me through how your initial audition process was like and what your first impressions were of your character?
The audition process was kind of crazy because I didn't have to do a recall or anything like that. I just kind of got the offer after a little bit. So it was I think it was like 2021. The pandemic was starting to ease a bit more as well across the UK. Stuff was going back to set, etc., etc., with guidelines, of course. And I remember because the industry's floodgates had just opened up, I just had a whole bunch of tapes to get in. And I had like a series of generals, I had a couple of sheriffs, I had like a whole bunch of stuff. And I remember I booked one of them and I was recalled for a film. And then that happened, and then sort of like 2 days after that I got a call from my agent sort of saying, so hey, so you got the recall for this one gig, we're trying to figure out how you can do them both at the same time. And I was like, hang on, do both what at the same time? And it turns out it was Wednesday. It's like, well, the Tim Burton thing. And I was like, what Tim Burton thing? Because when you get these briefs a lot of the time, especially if they're kind of sort of like high end or top secret, you don't really see who's producing or directing. And at the time, I was just doing so many tapes that I was probably not doing my due diligence that well. But I had no idea, and I kind of just booked it out of the blue. Yeah, and then the rest is history. My first impressions of the character, I think the audition scene was the scene in season one inside of the morgue where we find Garrett Gates's body after he had committed suicide. Sorry, trigger warning. But yeah, I think from there I was just kind of like, well, don't really have a sense of who this is because right now that this is just somebody doing something. But I sort of understood the hierarchies in the role, and I started fleshing out somebody who felt a little bit more like a newbie. Not, I mean, to be a deputy, you can't be quite new, but somebody who still has a lot to prove, and is still a little bit anxious about how they're going to go about proving that, which is really different to who we find Santiago to be in this season. A year, some time on from all of Gulpin's kind of mess as well, and really trying to rebuild faith in the sheriff's department, from both sides, for the normies of Jericho and for the outcast students of Nevermore, and just trying to maintain peace and calm without people grabbing pitchforks and stuff, blaming people for things beyond their control. So she's got a really tricky job to do. In that, like, there has to feel like there's order, even amongst the chaos, because otherwise people in chaos behave chaotically. Yeah.
And speaking of that, what was your experience like stepping on the set for the first time and getting to meet your castmates as well as, reprising your role and coming back for kind of this second
I
installment?
mean, I come from a theatre background. I've done some screen. I'd done some screen before this. I'd done a project with Alex Garland, but that was like a few days on set, and then little things here and there. Um, so the first time I came onto the Wednesday set was a big kind of. It was the first time I was sort of at a table read and like a fully named character. So that felt wild. It felt really, really exciting. And it was just so crazy to be in a room with all of these incredibly talented people. I think also because we had COVID to contend with still when we were shooting in Romania. We had cast briefings for protocol. And it was just wild to be sat on your laptop and you're like, oh, that's Catherine Zeta-Jones. Okay, cool. That's nice. Hi. It was a really, really exciting experience, and I got to learn so much on that sort of first run. And then coming back the second time, I think I felt a bit much more confident, because I was sort of like, okay, cool, I know what I'm doing. But also greater responsibility because now this character has a little bit more of a journey, and has also just more responsibility in the world as well. So I mean, I have anxiety, so like I just immediately called my therapist and I was like, right, I'm gonna need support. So I'll be seeing you once a week for the duration of the shoot. Thank you very much. Which was really really helpful. I just made sure that I had the support around me. But the set was amazing. Everybody was really lovely, and I always felt supported. So it was great.
And I think personally watching this show, I think your character brings, a lot of realism to this fantastical world, because the characters are always brimming with this kind of like fictional energy to them, but your character is like very real. So how did you kind of bring that level of authenticity in a show with such diverse characters? Like, what was your creative process like?
I spent some time, I live in England, so it was really hard for me to like go and find a sheriff's department. And anyway, you need permits and all sorts for that kind of stuff. But I did as much research as I could into procedures around local law enforcement, and what it would take for somebody to become sheriff. I tried to research, procedures in the building as well, and just immerse myself in that. I watched a lot of shows with a lot of sheriffs in them. Not necessarily to like take performance, but just to get the vibe, um, and to understand what the job kind of entailed rather than just reading it from kind of text-based material. And then on set, that's when the magic happens because, it's unlike stage where you get, luckily, if you're lucky, 4 to 5 weeks of rehearsal and you get to unpack a character altogether. Um, in on screen, you got about 10 minutes of rehearsal just before just before we start rolling. And then obviously we're going to take as many takes as we can to get the shot, but you don't have that lengthy amount of time. So I sort of came in with an offer. um you know this world, like you say, is so fantastical that there's always a little bit of a tongue in Santiago's cheek, kind of going, why am I at a like a superhero fight with a gun? Like, what am I doing here? Like, how am I actually gonna really help the situation? There's always this sense of the slightly absurd, for Santiago, but she still has to do her job, because despite the fact that she has to interact with outcasts on a regular basis, she also has to interact with normies. So she's got one foot in that world at all times. So I think in terms of the creative process, that was myself and Tim and Miles a bit, just tweaking, just taking shots and going, what is it? What is it? Oh, this is what you want. Okay, cool. Now we found that tone and that quality. We're going to go really for kind of strong, firm, assured, less of a glint in the eye. And then I just passed that, and then I, chatted to Miles, was like, what are your directions for this person? Got like 5 words, and I was like, cool, got it, awesome. And then we were done, and like we just knew what we had to roll with to stay grounded in that moment.
That's a beautiful answer, and I know it's like very in depth, the experiences and everything. But like, you are coming back for the season. So what's like the one thing that you have learned about Santiago in this season, now that you've portrayed her in the second installment again for the second time? Like, something that you never really got to know about your character in the previous installment.
Um, it's a really good question. I think it has to do with how strong she is, but that doesn't quite feel like it. There's something about strength in vulnerability. She can do a job and she can kick down a door and all of that, but there's something about openness to her that I discovered. There's Even though the world is so absurd, there is no point at which she is doubting anyone or judging anyone or discriminating against anyone. Ultimately, it's not, oh, you bad outcast. It's, you've done something illegal like anybody else would. Like, and if you do something illegal, I have to step in, and I don't care where your background is, I have to step in. And at the end of the day, what we're dealing with here, something that became really clear to me actually in the second season, was these are kids, regardless of how souped up they are, or how powerful they are on a full moon, or how many psychic powers they have, or how much electricity they can fire, or fireballs they shoot, or powers of persuasion they have, or you know snakes coming out of their heads. They're still children. and they still have to get home safe to their families, and they deserve to live full lives. So I think that's just something that I discovered about Santiago, is the level of care that goes into it. It's not there. It's not disinterest. It's not, oh, I just have a job to do, so I'm going to show up. I think she really cares about every member of her community.
That's so beautiful because she was so good, and I like after hearing the Sansa, I feel like
Thank you.
she's my
That's
favorite
sweet.
character. Like there's that like level of empathy in her, and that that's very.
I think so. I think so. And best intentions are always are simply that, intentions, whether she succeeds at that or not. That's, you know, up for grabs, but I think that's where it's coming from. Because we don't see our own biases until we're met with them, right? We don't know until we put our foot in it, right? And then we're like, oh, okay, I have a bias here. I didn't realize that before. So I think that that's quite interesting for her as her journey. I really like that. I really like discovering that this season, discovering, yeah, discovering the inability to meet one's intentions, right? What does that mean? Yeah.
That's amazing. And you were talking about Tim Burton, and Tim Burton's mind is just so extraordinary. Like he's a living legend. So what was it like working with him
It was
specifically?
fantastic. I mean, he's the only way that I can kind of describe him is like a little bit of a mad scientist, right? He's, as a director, I think he has such a beautiful and full and rich understanding of the medium. Of course, he does. But I think it also goes beyond that. He has an ability to hold all of the pieces on a set, but also allow people to bring their creative influence. And I think that that's a rare thing, because a lot of sometimes when you have such a particular vision, you can have people who lock artists into what the thing that they want specifically, whereas I think that Tim really unlocks and allows for play and collaboration for everyone.
Playing Santiago, is there like any quality that you feel like you would love to have of her in your real life self, as well as some quality of your real life self that you wished Santiago, had of yours that might help her navigate this kind of crazy world?
Yes. A quality that I wish Santiago could have of mine is just my playfulness and silliness. I think that I often project, if people don't know me, they're like, "Oh, you're quite stern," and I'm like, "I'm actually just three raccoons in a trench coat. I'm ridiculous. I I'm an adult. I'm a kid with adult money. That's basically what's happened. So I think a little bit of playfulness, a little bit of warmth, that letting their hair down, that side. And then I think a quality of Santiago's that I would want is the ability to focus, because my focus is all over the place. ADHD for the win. But I would love that ability to just, start a task and then finish that task. That would be great. That would be awesome.
I have ADHD too, so I can relate 100%.
That would be great.
Focus is it.
Yeah, executive function, that would be awesome.
Just living like normal for one day.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how this character is like very authentic. Even the world, every character is very kind of like fictional, fantastical. But your character is kind of grounded. So do you personally like this sense of portrayal, or would you like to kind of try out Santiago being a sort of outcast with magical, abilities as well as compared to be this grounded person?
I mean, who doesn't want to have magical abilities? I mean, like that would be fun. Does it make sense? I don't know. But that would be really fun. That would be a really really good time. But I think there is something, coming from again from a theater background and just looking at story, and that rule of, are you in major and are you in minor, there is something, each part of the story is absolutely necessary. So as much as I would love to shoot electricity from my eyeballs, I think that the story would lose something if it suddenly lost that element of groundedness. I think all of the pieces together make the whole. So I feel like, Yeah, I tend to get really grounded people to play, which is wild because I'm the opposite of that. but but yeah, I think that to answer your question, I would love it, but I can also see narratively why having a grounded element is incredibly necessary because otherwise then everything is a little bit out there, which is great.
Yeah, exactly like you need to have some kind of sensibility, especially navigating
Yes,
Jericho.
absolutely.
But yeah, so you did so amazing in this part as well as the previous season, but we are almost on the verge of the second part of the second season releasing. So,
Yeah.
what can you tell us about your involvement in this forthcoming part? Like, can we expect more of your arc in this one?
Yeah, you can. I feel like, Wednesday's been yeeted out of a window, so so, a child has been harmed. So, we have work to do. What's going on? Why are children breaking the law? This is a felony. What are we doing? Guys, so many laws. So many illegal things have happened to get to this point that the paperwork is going to be this high. So yeah, I think basically just sort of like buckle up. There's just so much more that's going to happen, I think, because of the events that have transpired in the first part, that Santiago does has to step up a bit, and sort of bring order into Nevermore and Jericho, and try to contain this as much as they can, and navigate their limitations in doing so. Right? Nobody's gonna tell Wednesday Adams anything. Like, do you know what I mean? The last person in the world that's gonna listen to anybody's advice except for her own is Wednesday Adams. So, I think that there's a fair bit more for Santiago to do.
So, wrapping up, our beautiful conversation, I have to ask you what's next for you? Like, is there anything else that you're currently working on that you'd like to tell us or your fans about?
I've got I do a lot of video games. So I've got I'm the voice of Alawi for League of Legends for 4 Riot Games on 2XKO, so that's coming out soon. And then there's just some other stuff that I can't speak about, but yeah, it's all very exciting. There's some very, very exciting stuff. There's some really exciting projects that I'm starting on very soon in early September that I am really, really looking forward to sharing with everybody when the time is right. But for now, yeah, I have to keep my mouth shut.